Welcome to The Friday Habit with Mark Labriola and Benjamin Manley. The Friday Habit is for small business owners, freelancers, and creatives who are ready to take their business to the next level. Join us as we discover how to apply the strategies we learned to grow our businesses, make more money, and live every day like it's Friday. And welcome back to another Friday Habit. I'm your host, Mark Labriola II, and today we have a special guest. This guy's a beast, a machine. We got Damon Burton. He's a husband, he's a father of three, and he outranked $1 billion company on Google, leading him to build an international search engine marketing company. Since founding his company in 2007, Damon has worked with Inc. 5000 and Shark Tank businesses, tripling revenue during the recent pandemic. And he's been featured in publications like Entrepreneur Magazine, Forbes, BuzzFeed, and US Weekly. So he's got a lot to share with us. Damon, welcome to the Friday Habit.
What's up, Mark? Thanks for having me. I mean, if you start a podcast with dance moves, I know we're in for a good time.
That's right. Out of the gate, we're just having a good time.
Yeah.
So... it's the Friday Habit, so we're living every day like it's Friday.
I like it. Yeah. Well, let's do this.
Yeah, man. Hey, so thanks for being on the show, hanging out with us. Ben's not here today. He's out traveling the world. I'm not sure. I don't think he's left town just yet, but yeah, he's got like Mexico and Ireland and England.
Awesome.
I mean, there's just a lot of places he's going this year. So
I just got back from Mexico. Went down there for a week with Russell Brunson's group, and while I was down there, I closed Tony Robbins. So that was a trip.
Really? Congratulations!
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that was a fun trip.
Yeah, so that's cool. So is that part of like being a part of a mastermind or something like that, or?
This one was So every other year, Russell does a kids youth entrepreneur event, and so I brought my wife and kids and helped them. So when we went 2 years ago. My younger son sold $2,000 worth of stickers like 90 days after that event. So,
really?
So, I mean, you go, you hang out, you meet
Teaching
some cool
young.
people and awesome place. Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, that's cool. So have you found that those events are pretty profitable? Because I feel like we always hear, especially as entrepreneurs, get a mentor and buy a course and join a mastermind.
Yeah.
And sometimes it feels overwhelming about all the things that we have to do as entrepreneurs to be successful. Yep. And a lot of times I think we spend money on things and it's kind of a waste. And then we're like, man, why did I waste all that money doing that thing? And it didn't really produce any results.
Great question. So I will answer that by going through the evolution of my opinion on that, because it's all of the above, right? So in the beginning, I was so I've had my agency for 17 years, and probably the first 10 years of it, I largely avoided those kind of things. And so I went to a few, and, maybe like your local kind of commerce opportunities and things like that. And I just felt like I was playing at a different level. And so very nice people, but I didn't feel like I could get a lot of opportunity out of that group. And so I just started avoiding them. And then I went from 0 to 100. And so the first big one that I joined was Russell's, and his is the one that I've only continued to renew. I've jumped in a handful of others, but so I went from, free to low ticket ones to 50 grand. And so when I jumped in, I was like kind of nervous, obviously.
Yeah, you're like, hey, babe, can I take 50 grand from savings and go to this event?
Well, okay, so I'll try and condense the story because you're not wrong. What happened was we were at his event, Funnel Hacking Live, and I had some friends that I was with, and they had early access, and so they could get past this invisible line. And that really bothered me. I didn't want anything else. I didn't care for the early seats. I didn't care for the food. I just wanted to hang out with my friends. So I asked him, I said, I don't expect anything for free. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm willing to pay $1,000 for a blue bracelet instead of a red one.
Yeah.
And they said, no, this is only for award winners and coaching clients. So I ended up talking to this guy, and he goes, are you interested in coaching? And I said, not really. And he says, what about a mastermind? And I said, maybe. And he says, all right, here's the deal. You have to make at least $1 million. Okay, check. And it's 50 grand. I'm like, how in the hell did I just go from like 0 to 1,000 to 50?
Yeah.
But that's why I was there. So to your point, it's like I was there to cut the learning curve and get in front of my whole world is organic. And I'm like, okay, how do I scale this in other ways? So I joined, and it has, from a literal dollar perspective, has definitely driven an ROI. But then it's also, I think, for entrepreneurs, the reason why mentors and things like that are so important. The short answer is you have to find the right mentors and the right mastermind. But for me, the biggest thing I've learned is I've never really had doubts in what I could accomplish, but you have these glass ceilings that you don't even know exist. And so I go into groups like this going, I'm really proud of what I make in a year. And then all of a sudden you meet a new friend that does that in a day. And you're like, oh, and it just reframes your perspective on everything.
Yeah. So what was that? I mean, for you, it seems, and I don't want to like downplay any of the work that you did, but in some ways it seemed like 17 years ago, SEO and Google and all these things were very virgin, and it was a lot easier to like learn some skills and then do it because there wasn't much competition, one, and then two, so many clients and people just didn't know about it, and they just wanted to offload that to somebody to be like, hey, I need you to do this. So how did you kind of get in there, and was it something that you just understood simply, or like, can you kind of walk me through a little bit of your origin story of, going from working a day job or something like that to like dabbling in SEO? And then I think what's interesting too is that over the years, SEO has changed so much. And then now we have AI, and, there's the questions of like, is SEO even like necessary, or do you even need to hire a company? Because now the intern can just say, write me keywords and write me a blog post with these keywords and, do all these things. And you don't really need to hire anybody to do SEO. So I know that's a lot. So let's unpack it. Let's go back to the beginning. And
and I don't want to miss your AI question because the answer is going to be different than what most people expect.
All right, good.
So my origins,
hang on, folks, stick around.
We're going to create an open loop here.
That's right, exactly.
My origin story was that you must be psychic because you're not wrong again. It has to do with the day job. So I was working remote before remote was cool. The norm. And one day I was trying to get a hold of the company, and so I was like a lead designer for this company that did affiliate marketing offers, and I couldn't get a hold of the office. And so this was before Slack, and so I was like AOL Instant Messenger.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm like AIM and everybody, and I can't get a hold of anybody, and very rarely would I have to call, and I was like, I need to call, and I couldn't get anybody on the phone either. So something was clearly different that day. And then all of a sudden I get a message from somebody else, one of the designers I was the lead over, and they said, did you hear? And I'm like, did I hear what? I'm like, something's going on because I can't get a hold of anybody. And the company got shut down and raided by the ATF and the FTC.
Oh, dang it.
And so I literally went from a regular routine 9 to 5 to no job whatsoever. And so I had three choices. I finally got a hold of one guy who was not an owner, but he was one of the managers. And he says, well, the way that we have this company structured is like different legal entities. So our legal entity is fine. And so he told me I'd have a paycheck and everything like that. So I had three choices. One was see if I really did have a job. Two was not wait and go find a new job and have to start over. Or three was bet on myself and take the side hustle clients and see what I could do. And so I did the math, and the day job was like 80% of my time and 50% of my income. And so I'd be taking a pretty significant cut. But my wife and I were newly married. We didn't have kids yet, and she was working.
Yeah, low monthly nut. Don't we all dream of that? Like my wife and I are always like, how did we live on like $3,000 a month?
That's for real, totally. Well, it was like a mortgage and a car payment, and that was it.
Yeah.
And so I said, I think we have. I said, we won't have a lot of disposable income, but this sounds like as calculated as a risk as I can take. So
yeah.
So I started the. So
you already were doing. You said you had about 50% or 30% of your income was coming from a side hustle.
It was like 40, 50, yeah, but it was relative. Okay. I mean, back then it was, my day job was paying me like 30 grand and my side hustle I was making like 20.
Yeah.
So
right. Yeah.
It wasn't a huge amount.
And with the side hustle thing, how did that evolve? Like, where you're working your day job and then you just had some people on the side, friends or family or somebody being like, hey, can you help me with this? And you started evolving.
Yeah.
That's how I got started too. It was one of those things where it's like I picked up a camera, started working a day job, and then nights and weekends, someone would be like, "Hey, can you film my wedding?" Or "I need a video for my business," and then I was just taking whatever I could and then doing that, and that allowed my wife to stay at home during the day, and she didn't have to work a job, and I was kind of burning the candle at both ends.
Yeah, so I had my wife, we've been together 20 years, and so when her and I were first engaged, she worked at a hospital. So she'd get up at 3 a.m. to go to work by 4 a.m. And where I had the remote job, I'm like, why not get up early? And so I would knock out the remote work before everybody else was even awake. And so then I had the rest of the day to kind of work on the side. And so I had kind of built out a reputation for this certain type of affiliate marketing landing page design. And so I just started selling these bundles where it's like, I'll build you a landing page, a thank you page, an email kit, and I'll just do these little packages. And so I had kind of carved out a niche for those kind of affiliate marketing pages.
Dang,
so
that was like like in the early stages when Frank Kern and everybody's out there pushing stuff.
I don't even know. I was designing everything that landed in your spam box. Like it was like weight loss offers, work from home. Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's awesome.
So I ran with that, and where it started to take off was my wife was watching The Bachelor, and where I started transitioning to SEO it was a season finale, and they said, come back. Speaking of open loops, they said, come back after the commercial break and I'll tell you who the new guy is. And I said, that's weird. When I remember watching before, they would say, come back in a couple of weeks or a couple of months. And so the early entrepreneur in me was going, that was on purpose, but why? And so they come back and they announce this gentleman, and I start looking up, trying to find out why they're talking about this guy early, and I couldn't find anything, very, very little about this guy. And so I thought, if I know search engines and I'm not a diehard fan and I can't find this, and there are diehard fans that don't know search engines, just imagine the struggles they're having. So I told my wife, I said, I'm going to go build this unofficial fan site for Bachelor, and I outranked Bachelor, $1 billion company, in like 7 days. So I threw ads on there, made a couple $1,000 passive income, and that's where I really started to see, we talk about glass ceilings and things like that. I'm like, oh, there's potential here. And so then where I fully transitioned into SEO was one of my design clients said, what do you know about Google? And here's a really great opportunity for newer entrepreneurs, right? Like, you don't know how to get in your first client. Here's what I did. Is I said, I think I know enough that I can help you, but I don't know enough that I feel comfortable charging you because I'm still learning. So how about we agree to a deal? If I hit these goals, pay me retroactively, and then we start a retainer. So now I'm incentivized. They got nothing to lose. Yeah. Killed it, rolled that out to another client, and then here we are 17 years later working with big brands.
That's awesome. Yeah, and that is so true, as far as a lot of times you just need to provide value for free so you can build your portfolio, build your experience, and it's low stakes. And sometimes people feel like they're just better than that. And I'm like, listen, if you're going to be successful, like, you need to have a experience and a portfolio to present yourself. And if you're just always waiting for the right paying client to start building those things, then like you'll never have that entry point. So I think that's really wise, as far as that goes. So, okay. So you kind of been in the space, the affiliate marketing, digital marketing, the guru space. So like what about that like clicked for you, or when did you was the Russell Brunson thing like the first time that you kind of had some big success with doing those things? Because I being around the industry so much and being sold to constantly, like, buy this course, like, do this thing, and you too can be a millionaire. It's almost like, as entrepreneurs, we're always being bombarded to do these things. And then it's a lot like the infomercial ab machine, where you buy it and then you don't get your 6-pack abs with the laser induction, shock treatment, and then you just give up. Or you're always chasing that goal. What's your secret to like getting results and like pushing past kind of everybody else?
Good question, and it's going to be the opposite, which reminds me we need to touch on AI too. So no, I mean, Russell's mastermind inner circle was the first one I jumped all in on, and it was the first one I found success in. And then I went. So prior to that, I largely avoided those types of things. And in my path to success, specifically in the world of SEO, I found success by ignoring what everybody else is doing. So I don't pay attention. I don't go to SEO conferences because everybody else is largely regurgitating something they heard from somebody else that they heard from somebody else.
Yeah.
I don't read online articles. And so I forged my own path with the team. We figure out, okay, what do we want to A/B test and what do we think might work? How are algorithms evolving? And so I've largely ignored what everybody else does, and I've largely avoided shiny objects. And a great example is, who would have thought 17 years later I'm still in SEO? And so there's countless opportunities that I have on a weekly basis, and I always say no. And so what I focus on is, does that opportunity immediately support the goals that I already have? Because I don't have a shortage, and probably you and the listeners probably don't have a shortage of things you want to pursue. And so finding success is usually saying no to the other things that end up distracting you, focusing on one thing. So I've largely said no to just about everything. Now, when I saw how the tangible rewards in the first mastermind I had success in, I did go on a mastermind binge for 2 years, and I spent about $250,000. And out of all of those, Russell's is the only one that I've continued to renew, and I've dropped all the others. And so that's not to say like this or that's the best, but what it is to say is that there's a different opportunity within different groups for everybody. So some of those other ones I dropped, other people keep renewing those and didn't renew Russell's. And so you got to kind of fill it out. But one thing I have learned in these masterminds is that price is a quality filter. And so when you're looking at the groups you're going to jump into, it takes a certain level of success to meet the requirement of jumping in and having $1 million. But even more so, somebody willing to have the confidence to invest 50 grand on themselves. Like, you're surrounded by people that have big dreams. So I think you got to figure out where you're at and where you want to be at and find where that room is.
Yeah. Alex Ramosi always talks about Russell's group too. That was like a next level for him. As far as he had this idea and kind of a product, but it wasn't until he joined that group that it really helped him like laser focus what he was doing to like take it to the next level.
That dude, his goal was to make 10 or 20 grand a month. Like that was it, right? And now he's gone in for $1 billion.
Yeah, which is crazy. Yeah. And a lot of times we really handicap ourselves, right? It's almost like if you've never seen or experienced or believed in something bigger than that, like it's like, where do you even start with the dream, to say like, oh yeah, I could make $1 million a month, like that's like mind blowing. Or even for guys who are only pulling in, $3,000 to $5,000 a month. It's like, okay, how could I turn this into $20,000 a month or $50,000 a month? And so what do you think it is as far as the mindset goes to break from that glass ceiling, as you call it, of kind of rechanging your mind in order to see that there's more opportunity out there? Because I think about even just locally, like here, I'm in Denver, Colorado, right? And I think, okay, there's a lot of other agencies out in the Denver metro area, but we have almost like 5 million people in the Denver metro area and tens of thousands of businesses. And I'm like, okay, there's not enough agencies to support all the business and work that's around here. And so it's like, how do you, instead of getting discouraged, how do you take that and turn that into like positive motivation?
Yeah, I largely see two types of entrepreneurs that find success. And so one is the fast movers, right? And that's like Russell's world. And I come in there and I feel out of place because I'm the organic slow guy, right? And so for me, it's always been about, I never wanted to grow at the expense of my sanity. And so I remember being at one of the other masterminds and somebody said, well, what took you so long? And I knew the answer, but it was interesting to have somebody say it with a slightly negative connotation. They didn't mean negative, but...
Why are you such a loser?
Yeah, like, why does it take so long to make a bunch of money?
Hey, man, calm down.
But for me, it was, there's the people that are opposite of me where you can make money really fast by speed, right? Like success loves speed. And so there are people that just go. Like they build the plane on the way down, they figure it out. And I'm not that guy. And so it's like they both have their risks and rewards, their advantages and disadvantages. So the advantages of what I did is it's sustainable and it's less overwhelming, you know, and I never wanted to, like I said, my wife and I have been together for 20 years. We have 3 kids and I love her more than ever. And so like I was able to protect that while growing the business.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, there's people that can make way more money, way faster, but you know, usually it's at the expense of something, your health or your sanity or your relationships. Or it's kind of like feast or famine kind of thing. And so there's different ways and there's different tolerances and there's different appetites. You know, some people like the chaos and the fastness. So it just kind of depends on who you are. But the people that I've mentored, I never tell people what to do, but it's like, here's the advantages and disadvantages of those. And I've seen a lot of these mentees find success with a model that I took, which was offer something for cheap or free. But the key is like, you have to explain it, right? So where I said, you know, hey, I'll do this deal. I don't feel comfortable charging you. I also don't want to work for free. So if we hit these goals, pay me retroactively. So what I've been having these people do is, you know, there was this kid out of high school and I said, he wanted to do SEO. And I said, you can't do SEO until you understand websites. So start building websites. So we started positioning it where, hey lead, I do $500 websites, but I'll do it for free. And here's why, because I want to learn, I want to build my portfolio. Then it addresses the concerns, because if somebody comes to you and says, I'm going to do something for free, you're like,
yeah,
what's the catch?
Red alert.
Yeah. So he did that for a while. Then I said, okay, now start positioning it as $1,500 websites for $500. And he started doing that. And then I said, okay, now do the same thing with SEO. Start saying, usually you charge a couple $100 a month for SEO. Now you're going to do it for free because you want to learn. This kid now, he's 2 years into it and he just had his first $20,000 month.
Wow, that's awesome.
So when you can communicate your value exchange and what your goals are, most other people want to help you. And so if you can come in and figure out something that's valuable for them and mutually beneficial, you know, I don't think success is overly complicated. If anything, it's probably the simpler you can make it, then the higher probability you have of success.
Yeah, that is gold. You need to re-listen to this part of the podcast. So with you, did you always stay solopreneur, or have you grown? Do you have like a small team that you work with? Or?
I have 50 team members, yeah.
Okay, so 50's not small. It's but you guys are fully remote?
Yeah, we've always been, yeah.
Okay, awesome. And so with those team members, well, I guess one question is at what point did you feel like you needed to start bringing other people in? And then what have you seen as far as the scaling or growing or retention? Are they any of them W-2 or are they all 1099?
For me, they're all 1099s, yeah. So I've found there's, I always kind of ask, right? Like, how much do you want to be led? How much to understand being a solopreneur and being independent? And there's advantages and disadvantages to that as well. So where I started growing was, it was probably a year and a half before I brought on my first VA. And then they just kind of started to help with overflow. And the way that I did it, like when you hire your first person, it's kind of scary because you're like, oh, now I have to set aside this chunk of revenue. And so the way that I did it has evolved. In the beginning, I kind of looked at it just literally as math. And so before it was like piece rate. And then, okay, at what volume of piece rate does it just become more economical to pay him a salary? And so I communicated that in advance with them and said, if we get to this part, do you think it'd be more advantageous for both of us? You have more stability instead of ups and downs, and it's more cost effective for me. And so I communicated that line in the sand in advance of my first VA. And then when I started to grow I was listening to 2 audiobooks around the same time. One was E-Myth Revisited and the other was 4-Hour Workweek. And so if you're not familiar with them, 4-Hour Workweek teaches you how to compress time. And E-Myth Revisited teaches you that your business should be based on your SOPs and not dependent on people. And so when I was reading that, there's a value in reading them both around the same time, because you don't want to cut corners through the process of 4-Hour Workweek until you understand what's at stake through documentation of E-Myth Revisited. And so when I did that, I realized, well, why do I not give away? Why do I not delegate more of this stuff? And so then I really started to double down on SOPs. And, documentation, we all know or hear of the importance, but until you actually do it A to Z, you don't fully understand the tangible benefits. And so I doubled down on that, and then that allows you to maintain quality control as you scale and feel more confident as you delegate. So I went from, 1 VA to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 15, and then when the pandemic hit, we went from like 15 to 30. Like we grew a lot during then. And I'll tell you, the learning curves for me were, 2 and 3 wasn't a big deal. 5 was a learning curve. 5 to 10 wasn't much different. 15 was significantly different. I think that was probably the most different when you start getting, past a dozen and you get to a point where there's no more you to spread. Yeah. And so then you have to start focusing on developing leads and then training those leads to steer the ship after that. So 15 to 20 was pretty different. But then I don't think, 20 to 30, 20 to 40 wasn't as different.
Yeah. So then what were those, like you said, going from 5 to, or going from 3 to 5 was a little, like, what was the, like, learning things there? And then you said going from like 15 to whatever was a little bit learning. Like what were those things at those different stages that you had to like figure out or, learn?
In the beginning, it was, the 2 to 5 was, it was a new uncomfortableness that you weren't familiar with in setting aside a chunk of revenue, even though you knew you had to. But it was kind of, there's this trailing time where you delegate and give out payroll before that payroll increases to offset it, and so you're kind of betting on it. You're making an investment and planting seeds. Yeah. So that was new that you had to adjust to, and then there's also a point where you go, this thing is now bigger than me. And then you start to realize that person is dependent on you and that person's family is dependent on you. And so it becomes more personal and you start to look at how all the mechanics of it work a little bit differently. And then what changed after that, when you start getting into the dozen, was just the scalability. And it's like, okay, I built this thing and we have a good reputation. How do I not screw that up? And you can't do it anymore, Damon. But you have to lead this. And so now you have to shift from being a producer to a leader. And so that was new as far as like, okay, how do you document this even further? Like your team is as good or as bad as the documentation you provide them. So they're doing the work, but I got to figure this out. And so it was pretty significantly different things at each level.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is so true as far as like, as you grow, trying to replace yourself. I think that's the biggest thing that a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with is they think that they have all the knowledge of how to do something, or, it's one thing I struggle with is like I've built Brand Viva on a particular brand and style. And so there's a few times where I've tried to delegate some of that stuff and then it comes back not to my level of quality, and then it's just like, I'm just gonna do it myself, it's just like I'll just do it myself. And so I think that is and I think in some ways too, obviously with what you do there is a science and there's an art behind it, but it's a lot of like, okay, I can document like we do these things in this system and process and then we get these results. I think there's a little bit maybe of a different thing when it becomes to like creativity or art or something where it's subjective, where one person might say like, oh yeah, this is an animated text. But I'm like, yeah, but do you see the clunkiness of how the animated text is? It's not as fluid as I would like to see, or X, Y, and Z, So I think probably different industries have different hurdles or struggles of trying to remove yourself from the process. And really it's about finding good people or like surrounding yourself with people who can be taught and are good, are coachable.
Yeah. I mean, to your point of interpretiveness, because we run into a lot of that because we do a lot of designs to support the SEO, or there's dynamic situations where, we have a checklist, but that checklist may vary depending on which backend the website uses. And so what you have to do, the evolution of documentation for me was, to your point, at first it's like, what's the black and white stuff? Do that. But then where it becomes tricky is that interpretive stuff. And so then you have to go, okay, well, if I can't give them the answer, can I document the steps for them to find the answer themselves? And so that's where documentation became fun again, because you go through this big process of like, what's the low-hanging fruit? What's the stuff that's just black and white and knock off? Then after that, you get to the point, like you said, where it's like, well, it would just be faster for me to do it than to explain to them how to do it. But then are you always going to explain it? And so then that's when the light bulb goes off and goes, oh, I'll document how to explain it.
Yeah.
And then they can start to figure it out from there, right? And so we do a lot of video asks in our documentation now, or like jot forms where it leads them through a path and it goes, okay, well, you know, what are you running into? Oh, okay, it's this. And then, okay, what's the next subset of that? Okay, it's this. And so then we can kind of, the leads or myself can get out of the way, but still feel confident that we've held their hand to find the best, closest solution that they can find on their own.
Nice. Has it always just been an upward trajectory for you, or have you, over the past 17 years, has there been some like scary moments or times when things got tough, or you had to let go some people? And
yeah, it's generally been up because of, like we said, I never wanted to grow super fast, and so I was able to kind of figure out things as we went and prevent the catastrophes. But we recently had our biggest wild swing. Yeah. And so usually it's like 2 steps forward, 1 back, kind of continual progress. But, you know, as your team grows, it actually has to do with what we just talked about. So we took a big hit. We took like a 30% loss in like a 90-day span. It was just this perfect storm of nothing significant. But it was a buildup of 3 things. One was things I'd kind of advised the C-level on, of like, you know, here's how we do things and why. And so some of that interpretive stuff. 2 was quality control with the team. And then 3 was burnout. And so what had happened was it was this perfect storm of lots of little things in those 3 categories where I advised the team, like, here's how we do things and why. And they made some decisions on their own with good intent that overruled my experience. And what it started to create was a conflict in expectations. And so SEO is a very slow process. And all of our documentation is setting those expectations and pacing the client. So in our onboarding and our welcome kits, it's like, it's slow and here's why. It's slow and here's why. But then the team started sending progress reports more than usual. And so their intention was, let's show them the wins. Let's show them the wins. And what that ended up creating was unrealistic expectations where historically when we'd send them updates every other month, now it's like every 3 weeks. Then eventually they go, you know, Damon's team keeps telling me I'm winning, but I'm not seeing any money yet. And so it creates a conflict of the expectations where we are trying to say this takes a year. And then all of a sudden they get 4, 5, 6 months in and they're like, wait a second, they keep telling me I'm winning. And so I had to reframe the team and go, look, I know you were doing that with good intentions, but can you see what's the situation that's been created now? And because of that, and also because we had grown a ton last year, at some point you have to give over autonomy to the team and let them make hiring decisions. And as we were growing quickly, in my mind, it's like with our documentation, as long as the team hires somebody that can read and follow directions, then they can't mess that up.
right.
But what I didn't realize is at that scale of growth, when you turn over the documentation to a team member, does the lead follow up to ensure they understand the why? Like we were missing the why. We had the what in the documentation. And so then the team started, it's like water. It's like the path of least resistance. So they weren't doing things wrong, but we talk about interpretive things. They weren't understanding how that puzzle piece connected to the other piece and why. And so we had this perfect storm of small gaps in quality control that led to the team hiring more people to try and offset the gaps. So instead of fixing the problem, they just layered more people onto the problem, which then diluted the quality control even more, which led to burnout. And so it was like this perfect storm of all these things that I had forecast individually and guided the team on that just came to a head. And so that brought me back into production for a little while to kind of stop the bleeding. But since then it's been good. Every time we've run into that was probably the most significant issue I've seen in my career. But every time we've had something at a smaller scale, the first thing I do is go, okay, what's the learning opportunity in this? Yeah. And so from that, we were able to go, oh, we need to add the why to all of the documentation. And then I was able to go into the team and go, now all those things I've talked about, now you can see what I was talking about. And then it clicked better for them. And so now we're leaner. We were able to trim the team, improve the documentation. And so ultimately it ended up being better. But yeah, I mean, that was new for me to have that at this length in my career.
Yeah. Are you still the face of every sale, or are you out front, or do you have team members who, like, do you have business coming in where it's like, oh, I never even saw this client or even interacted with them?
A little bit of both. So I am certainly the face, largely because I enjoy it. So when I said I had to go back into production for a while to help the team, I'm largely out of production. And the part that I like about business is the conversations, meeting new people, networking. And so for me, that's personally rewarding. And then it also supports business. So that's where I spend my time. Once the deal's done, though, it's an immediate transition to my team. So we have a process. So I'm not maintaining it after that.
Yeah.
But this year, so we've grown to this without doing any ads. We don't have an email list. We don't have any outbound lead generation. So it's all built on reputation and referrals. And so this year now we've been going, okay, well, wouldn't that be cool? Look at how much we've done without lead gen, intentional lead gen. So now we've been building out the processes and the foundation of that so we can still protect everything else while we scale quicker. So we are building out sales. We will have somebody else doing that new part of sales. I'll still continue to do the networking and things that I enjoy. So it'll be fun to see where we're at the end of this year.
That's cool. What about your team, is the culture, like, do you guys have like ongoing meetings? Like, how do you kind of work remotely with so many people? And what have you found to be successful and not successful? Is there an element of like, I have these key people that I meet with, like my executive team, and then they kind of meet with everybody else? Or what's your structure?
So half my team's in the U.S., the other half's in the Philippines. So all our development and design's in the Philippines. And then anything that's quality control, copywriting, that's all in the States. That's evolved, obviously, with the size of the team over the years. So before when it was like a dozen of us, I would lead everything. When it started to be 20 or so is when I had to go, I just need to communicate with the leads and they can kind of pass it on. And then last year I went a step further. I only talked to my COO, at least on a consistent basis, right? And so we're in Slack and there's messages here and there, but I don't conduct the meetings whatsoever anymore. And so now the department leads have their own meetings. So the design team has meetings, the dev team has meetings, the copywriters have meetings, and then the COO will get on with the leads and have meetings with them.
Yeah.
So it's kind of evolved, but as far as maintaining that culture, I didn't have my first team member. I never had anybody quit until, I want to say, about year 10. So our internal retention is through the roof. And since then, we've probably only had 4 other people quit. And I'd fired people, but as far as actually somebody wanting to leave, and what I've found that works really well is by prioritizing our team as people first. And a good example would be, especially if you have VAs or somebody overseas, is their economic conditions are so substantially different that the things that we take for granted are game changers for them. So when we bring on a new team member, the first thing I ask them is, tell me the specs on your computer. Does it have at least this much RAM? And then do you have a dedicated workspace? Because a lot of these people are working on their kitchen table with kids running around screaming. And then, especially if they're somewhere like in the Philippines, I ask them if they have an air conditioner. And most of them don't.
Right.
And so I'll just figure out how to make them more comfortable, which of course helps support productivity. Yeah. But it just changes their dedication and willingness to support.
Yeah, it's like now all of a sudden, like, wow, you care about some of those baseline needs. It's kind of like that the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it's like if you're taking care of people from these foundational bottom places, then it's like then they can thrive and be more all in on what you're doing and give back and produce better for you. So it just makes sense to kind of take care of them at a lower level.
Yeah. Yeah, so I just give them autonomy. Look, like at some point, you either fully trust your team or you don't. And I've
Right.
never wanted to micromanage. And so by process of elimination, that means I need to fully trust them. And so you can tell generally pretty quickly, especially if you have your documentation done well, like you can tell if stuff is getting done or not. And so I don't have to babysit them, but just prioritizing them as people. A good example is one of my VAs was terrified of swimming, but he wanted to learn to swim. And so this is a grown man that had never swam. And so I said, well, how can I get these baby steps going? How can I support you? And he wanted a kiddie pool. Like it's a hilarious story, but it's a very true story. And so I bought him just a little like 8-inch deep, like 3-foot
Nice.
kiddie pool. And so he would send me pictures of him he was so terrified to just be in the water.
Right.
And so he'd send me these pictures of him just sitting in this little kiddie pool. Now fast forward, and that evolved into him taking swimming lessons, things like that. Now he's a competitive swimmer, and now
No
he
way.
teaches
Wow.
other people how to swim. And so he was able to take that and be relatable and go, look, here's where I came from. I hated the water too. And I can help guide you through that from a compassionate position. And so little things like that are always fun stories. I've been asked to be a godfather twice. I was invited to a wedding in the Philippines. It was when my wife was due with her third kid. And so I didn't want to fly her halfway across the world. So I said I couldn't make it. But what was interesting is they cared enough about the relationship that we had established that even though I couldn't make it, this is probably the funniest story, but it really illustrates how deep you can build a connection with your team, is they went and got, so I'm 5'11", and Filipinos are generally shorter, 5'3", and they went and got a life-size cardboard cutout of me. So there's a 5'11" Damon just like towering
nice.
over this wedding line, and they send me the pictures. I have pictures of me.
Oh, that's hilarious. That's
Right.
awesome. That's
So-
so cool.
Yeah, so it's become fun.
So how have you seen the industry closing that loop? Like, how have you seen the industry evolve, especially when it comes to SEO and AI and the introduction of AI? How have you maybe used it to your advantage, and then how do you also tell people to say, hey, there's a massive quality difference in the SEO results you get with your company?
So two surprising answers, one on the evolution of SEO in general, and then two on AI. So the evolution of SEO is it has changed significantly less than most people think. So there are continual algorithm updates, sometimes even daily, but the huge ones are, maybe 2-3 times a year. But if you think about all of those algorithms and everything, the thousands of things that go into SEO, you can simplify them into 3 core areas of fulfillment. And they've always been 3 core areas of fulfillment. So the first one is your website structure. Does it have a clean, easy to use design? Does it load quickly? Is it mobile friendly? Just the user experience. The second core area is content. You can only position yourself on Google for what Google can read. And we'll come back to that on the AI topic too. And so it's like, do you have value added content? And then the third level, the third area, the third scope is external credibility. Do people talk about you? Do they link to you? Do they review your website? And that's why reviews are important for local businesses. And so the evolution of algorithms, like if we go back, there was major algorithm updates in 2011 and 12 called Panda and Penguin. Those focused on credibility of links and unique content. And so even nowadays with the introduction of AI, this is not new for Google, because like that 2012 algorithm update called Panda was based on quality content. And so before AI, there was these tools called spinners, which would take your paragraphs and, you could go copy Wikipedia or go copy your competitor, stick it in a spinner, and it'd shuffle the paragraphs and the synonyms and create quote unquote unique content. And so the biggest algorithm to date prior to one this year was based on content back in 2012. So that was a long time ago. Now, AI, I think, just expedited this, right? It just was on a grander scale, but it's not a new game. I think Google just needed time to catch up. And so if you think about, but from the time that ChatGPT was released to when Google released Bard, their version, was only 6 months. Like, there's no way that they built something at that scale in 6 months. They probably already had it, and they just didn't want to release it because it affected their revenue model. Like, you don't want to release the thing that bites the hand that feeds you
Right. Yeah.
until you're forced to, and they were forced to. Now, how that's affected SEO is there's the people that have leaned fully into AI on the content production side. And that's where we've shied away from it. So AI is awesome. I don't need to explain why you should consider it. But purely from the content side, like we'll use it for research, we'll use it for data analysis, we'll use it for keywords, but we don't use it for any content output whatsoever. And it's because AI is largely a giant database of existing content.
It's like a big scrambler.
Yeah, right. And so there's two things. Here's where the AI advocates kind of always come throwing their pitchforks at me. Is they're like, well, if Google can tell your AI content was created by AI, then you're not doing it right. Okay, maybe, but right, here's my argument to that. The thing that AI doesn't have is your unique stories. It doesn't have your personal experiences. So like a general example I give is, like if you're in the food space, like we have a client that sells cookies, and AI doesn't know the story of when you would go to your grandma's house as a kid and you walk in and you could smell those home-baked cookies, right? And so we all have some version of that, of something that happened over our life that was a unique perspective that we can narrate in a real relatable way. And that's, so it's not to say that, AI is bad, but if you look at the other side, when all your competition is leaning into generalized content from AI and they're producing 10, 20, 30 articles a month, when you just focus on 2 or 3 that are really unique and value added and are relatable, that's the disconnect right there. It's not to say that you can't create informative content with AI, but is it relatable?
Though. Yeah,
right?
The depth of it. Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. And even I've seen a lot with creative lyric writing and music and all these other kind of things, but I think we'll start to find a depth, right, of like a computer's never gotten their heart broken, so the way that they explain a poem or the way that they write a song is going to be way different than someone who actually has gotten their heart broken and is writing a song about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think the part that people miss is that whatever it is that you're producing your content, whether it's on social media or your blog, for your email list, whatever, is people might follow you for the product or service or expertise that you offer, but most of them are going to buy when they realize they relate to you or they trust you or you're going to protect their dollar or their investment. And that's the part that's usually missing. We've all read content and at some point you go, there's something off here, right? And it's that depth that you're talking about.
Yeah, totally. Man, this has been a great conversation. I've loved just hanging out with you and talking and chatting about all this stuff, your journey and SEO. What are some keys that you can give people to say, if they haven't been focusing on SEO, like what are some fundamental or foundational things that you can say, hey, you should at least start doing X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, 2 things. We'll keep it simple, right? So the first thing is we talked about those 3 core pillars. And the one that makes or breaks the other 2 pillars is your website. How easy does it load, right? So here's a free website. Go to gtmetrix.com and see how well your page is loading, right? Can you make it load quickly or not? And then after that, just focus on content. Start sharing those stories, put out the relatable content and the value added, and that's where people are going to connect.
That's awesome. Well, Damon Burton, thank you so much for hanging out with us on the Friday Habit, sharing your wealth of knowledge and experience. Where, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, talk more about SEO, maybe even hire you, where's the best place to go?
Yeah, super simple. DamonBurton.com. On there, if you want to learn more, you can download my free book, or you can hit me up and see if we're a match. All
right. Awesome. And thank you so much for listening to the Friday Habit. If you go to thefridayhabit.com, you can find show notes for this episode. There you can also find links to our website, some ways to get in touch. And at the bottom of the page, you can download our guide to the Friday Habit system that's going to show you how to set aside 1 full day each week dedicated working on your business instead of in your business. You can always email us at hello@thefridayhabit.com if you have some guest suggestions or a particular topic you want us to cover. And until next time, live every day like it's Friday.